Hello, everybody watching. Chad Decker here with Blockchain Training Alliance. I got Chris Bennett here as well from Blockchain Training Alliance. And today we have a very special guest. Todd Little from Oracle has joined us and is going to be answering some questions for us. How you doing, Todd?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Doing great. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to do it.
Chris, how we doing?
Doing good. Happy Friday to everyone. Hope you guys had a great week. I know I've been looking forward to this selfishly all week. We got a lot of good questions, and I've just been really excited to pick Todd's brain. So this is the highlight of my week, that's for sure.
Absolutely. We've been very excited about this all week. I know it's been a lot of anticipation. Hey, Todd, can you do us a favor and kind of go through your background a little bit and tell us about how you got into the blockchain space and tell us a little bit about your background at Oracle?
Sure. I came to Oracle through the BEA acquisition, which actually, I ended up at BEA through an acquisition from Digital Equipment. So a series of acquisitions there. And my background is largely, for the last 15, 20 years, has been largely around high-performance transaction processing. So I'm the chief architect for the Oracle Tuxedo product family, and that provides a high-performance transaction processing platform that's used by Fortune 1000 companies to do transaction volumes of anywhere up to some number of hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. And as far as the blockchain stuff, we started looking about what are the other ways could we expand in doing transaction processing other than the traditional TPMs that we've been using, and came across blockchain. And after a couple of proposal submissions to our executives, they finally said, go ahead and build it. So that's what my team has been doing for the last 2.5 years.
Amazing, great stuff. And can you give us a little background for maybe one or two people that don't know who Oracle is or what you guys do? But can you give us a little background about Oracle and kind of the transition you guys are looking at here into the blockchain space?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny, coming to Oracle, and when I talk with customers and stuff like that, everybody equates Oracle to database. That was Oracle's first product and its only product for many, many years. And so people talk about, yeah, we run Oracle. And I'm scratching my head going, what does that mean you're running Oracle? We offer, a wide range of enterprise software. So ERP applications, a lot of SaaS applications, a bunch of middleware, and of course, numerous database technologies. So we're focusing on enterprise customers, although we do small and medium business as well. And it's the whole gambit of software. We're also moving into, very quickly here, a little bit late, moving to the cloud and making our SaaS applications available as SaaS. So things like, I say, HCM, ERP, supply chain, all those kinds of applications now are moving us to these services on the cloud.
Awesome, thank you. And can you go through, now that kind of transitioning into blockchain, can you go through how Oracle sees the impact of blockchain in the enterprise right now, currently the current state of the environment, and also probably like the next 5 or 10 years, what's Oracle's outlook on blockchain?
Sure. So blockchain is pretty revolutionary in terms of what it allows companies to be able to do. What we're seeing, the biggest interest are things like the traditional, I guess, blockchain applications, if you can call it the traditional within the time frame, but things like supply chain, track and trace, provenance of information, financial markets, so doing cross-border payments, invoice factoring, all those sorts of applications are going to be things that are going to move to a blockchain. And largely because it helps increase the amount of trust between organizations, and as well, in many cases, it's going to eliminate intermediaries that just add cost and time delays to those things. So we're seeing across many, many industries, we're seeing interest in blockchain. Everything from healthcare to consumer electronics to loyalty systems, and of course some of the traditional, let's say, things like enterprise requirements planning, ERP applications. As far as the transition, what we're seeing within Oracle is that our customers have an interest in this because of the increase in trust that is available through a blockchain. And so our SaaS applications are now starting to adopt blockchain technology and using our platform to do that.
Great, great. So for an enterprise client, what appeal does this have? Does blockchain have currently from the clients that Oracle has right now?
Okay. Right now, a lot of it has to do with the transparency. So, if with the traditional systems, everybody's got their own silos of data, and I've got my data, you've got your data. With something like blockchain, we can come up with a single system of record that we can use as a source of truth for anything that we're doing together between our two businesses. So that's one of the big areas, is sort of this transparency and trust that it helps. It also helps in things like availability and security. To hack a blockchain would require somebody to attack many nodes and basically subvert many nodes in a network, and that makes it pretty impractical to do. So we're seeing that it also provides higher security for transactions between companies and an assurance that the data that they have is accurate and up to date. We're seeing as well the ability to be able to do new businesses that just weren't possible before. So things like marketplaces that you can simply automate. Those kinds of technologies, those kinds of applications are a great fit for blockchain technology.
Absolutely. And so Chrissy just asked, what's the difference between the cloud and blockchain, decentralized versus centralized? And that kind of leads into my next question as well. What are your thoughts on permission versus permissionless blockchains, and where do you stand on the argument?
Yeah, well, we're only focusing, at least at Oracle, on permissioned blockchains. Our enterprise customers are dealing with their customers or their suppliers, and they need to know who those people are. So the anonymity that a permissionless blockchain provides you doesn't provide any value. Our customers have to adhere to things like anti-money laundering laws and know your customer laws. And those are very difficult to do in a permissionless blockchain because you don't have an idea about who the partner is that you're working with. So it's very difficult to comply to those kinds of applications. Right now there's really only one good consensus protocol for permissionless blockchains, and that's proof of work. And that is consuming an enormous amount of energy. So we would prefer to see that they can come up with something else if we need to have permissionless blockchains. But that's going to be that's a big concern, because if Bitcoin continues to grow, the amount of energy being wasted just to do mining to be able to cut blocks is staggering. In a permission blockchain, you don't have that issue because you know who the parties are, so you can come up with other consensus algorithms that are much more efficient. And that's really where we're focusing on, is the permission blockchain market, with just solely on that market.
Okay, and so can you go through a little bit and explain to us how blockchain fits into Oracle's products and solutions offerings?
Yeah, so we announced at Oracle Open World 4 blockchain-based applications. So they are, let me get my notes here. One of them is what we call intelligent track and trace. So intelligent track and trace is a way for customers using like an ERP application to be able to track and trace the provenance of information or the provenance of goods or supplies. So that's one of them. Another one is what we call cold trace. So cold trace is another tracking application to be able to track goods that have to be kept refrigerated. So using a combination of blockchain and IoT, we're able to track the provenance of the goods to make sure that they've been handled properly, that they haven't been subjected to excessive heat. And as I say, we're integrating these into our SaaS applications. Oracle has a wide portfolio of SaaS applications, and most of them are in the midst of adopting some form of blockchain usage where it makes sense. So like I say, in our ERP application, they're looking at this to be able to do things like invoice factoring, to be able to do invoice submittal. One of the big problems with invoices and purchase orders and the like is that each party has a different view of it. So if I order a bunch of goods, I may not get them all together, even though they were on one purchase order, and I give an invoice for that. The supplier gives an invoice for that, but they may not have provided all of it. Maybe it comes in a multiple set of shipments. How do I keep track of that if I have separate systems? I have to go through some sort of reconciliation. So by using a blockchain, especially a permission blockchain, I can invite parties together, and we can then make sure that we have a single source of truth. So that's going to be a really big benefit for any kind of B2B applications. because we no longer have to have separate sources of truth. We can have one source of truth and completely eliminate reconciliation.
Yeah, exciting. A lot to offer there. Um, I apologize if I get this name wrong. It looks like Sanji asked, is it possible to use blockchain as a NoSQL database? And let me lead that in. That kind of it's a great lead in for our next question. Can you describe or simplify the basic architecture infrastructure platform for the Oracle's blockchain cloud platform? I believe it's built on HyperLedger Fabric, but can you go through the basics of the architecture and the platform for us?
Sure. So yeah, we are based upon HyperLedger Fabric. We're a member of HyperLedger, have been for the last couple of years. And what we've done is we've been taking HyperLedger Fabric, which is a permission blockchain platform, highly modular, where almost everything can be replaced. So you can replace the consensus mechanism, you can replace the underlying database technology that's used, you can replace pretty much everything within Fabric. You know, how membership is handled, how identities are handled. All of that stuff is pluggable because of the modularity of Fabric. So within Fabric, there are several key components. One is called a peer, and a peer is essentially the computing node that takes care of maintaining the ledger. There's also then smart contracts. So we do have a smart contract capability within Fabric. So we can run smart contracts in Go, on Java, or Node. And the smart contracts then basically execute the business logic. I like to view them as stored procedures in some regards, because there's a lot of similarity between a smart contract and a stored procedure. Besides the peers, then there's what's called a certificate authority that provides the certificates that are used to actually conduct the transactions. Within Fabric, all messages are signed, and so you need a PKI certificate to be able to do that. So one of the components that's provided as part of HyperLedger Fabric is a certificate authority that handles the issuance of and revoking of certificates. We've integrated that in our platform with Oracle's Identity Cloud Service. So that way you can use our Identity Cloud Service to be able to register and grant permissions for people to be able to participate. There's also then finally what's called an ordering service. I should say finally, but an ordering service in Fabric is what does somewhat like what miners do in Bitcoin. So the ordering service is responsible for taking transactions and putting them in a specific order and then placing those transactions in a block and disseminating that block out to the other peers. So there's a big difference though in Fabric from other traditional blockchains, in that in Fabric what happens is we simulate the execution of the smart contract before committing the results. So we simulate that across multiple peers based upon something called an endorsement policy. And then with that those endorsements, the client can then submit the transaction to be ordered. But they have to first collect enough of these endorsements. This is how Fabric ensures that the state of the world databases across multiple peers are in sync. Once that's placed in the ordering service and ordered, as I say, it goes back out to the peers to be committed. And again, validation checks are made at that point. So we use multi-version concurrency control. And that means that there may have been dirty reads that are in your transaction because somebody else may have modified something you read at endorsement time, and it's no longer that same value at commitment time. So we apply multi-version concurrency control to make sure that the transaction is valid. It's got the proper signatures, the proper endorsements. Once all that's done, the transaction is committed to the state database. And that state database is, I guess you could call it NoSQL. It's a key value store. And our services replaced the level DB that's used in standard Fabric with Berkeley DB to get some enhancements. And we'll cover that a little bit more in some ongoing questions here. So okay. I think that covers it.
Great, yeah, great answer. I appreciate that. And we're getting the same question that keeps coming up here a little bit. I want to kind of dive into this and walk carefully, but how does Oracle position itself differently from some of your competitors and solutions?
Yeah, so there are several competitors that are offering Fabric as a basis for their blockchain platform. Mm-hmm. I think the things that make ours unique is, one is that we are usage-based in terms of charging. So we charge by transaction with a minimum transaction volume of about 500 transactions per hour. So 500 transactions per hour equates to, depending upon the kind of contract you have with Oracle, to about $360 a month for a small configuration. As your commitment goes up higher, we provision additional resources, and we have different shapes, if you will, compute shapes, depending upon the kind of volume you're anticipating. So we're usage-based, which I think is unique in the field right now. And as well, we've made a bunch of enhancements to make it much easier to manage and monitor your blockchain platform. So we've got a console that takes care of the administration. You can do such things as add new organizations, because Fabric is a consortium-based blockchain. You need to have means to be able to exchange the crypto material such that you can add new members and everybody knows about that, and the crypto material is accepted and exchanged. We handle all of that through our console as well. Then it takes care of the monitoring and management of the compute resources. Probably the biggest difference, though, is that we're what we call an Oracle managed service. So an Oracle managed service means that Oracle takes care of providing the infrastructure, monitoring the infrastructure, taking care of patching, taking care of upgrading, taking care of backups. So all those kinds of operations Oracle handles for our customers. So that allows them, the customers, to focus just on their deployment of their smart contracts and the configuration of their network. But all the underlying pieces and the rest of that Oracle takes care of as part of a managed service.
Yeah, that is so cool, because I've seen in so many organizations, planning out the network and the infrastructure is oftentimes a much bigger and more significant task than actually planning out, building, delivering, and supporting the solution. So, boy, for less than $500 a month to be able to get your toes dipped in the water of blockchain, that's a very, very attractive offering.
Yeah, that's what we wanted to do, is we want to make it attractive to customers to try it out. And that's the same thing we noticed, because if you go to the open source community, in many cases, what you get is a bunch of command line tools, and that's how you do everything. Well, that's a tough way to have an operations staff have to manage something. So that's why we provide this console to be able to do that. Another thing we provide, by the way, that I'm pretty sure is unique, is that we offer a REST proxy to the service. So early versions of Fabric 0.06 had a REST interface to the blockchain, but when Fabric went to 1.0 and beyond, they removed the REST APIs. So what we're providing then is a proxy that can take REST requests and then turn those into the gRPC requests that are necessary to be able to interact with Fabric. And this has been very popular with our customers, because trying to integrate a blockchain application using the SDKs means you've got to have an SDK for the environment that you're in. And there's 3 SDKs right now that are supported. There's Go, Node, and Java. Even if you're using one of those languages in your application, to be able to integrate it is typically much more difficult, especially for packaged applications. Whereas most packaged applications can make REST calls or receive REST calls. So by using the REST proxy, we can get around the issue of having to do straight gRPC.
Yeah, huge value add. And I think it's kind of cool for anyone watching. It shows that the HyperLedger community is much bigger than just IBM. And there are over 220 corporate sponsors and backers, groups like Oracle, who are really making some cool contributions. So Todd, let me ask you, are you guys just purely making a play on the technical side, on providing the solutions infrastructure, or do you work with any of your customers and clients to help do discovery, use case analysis, solution design, or do you guys really step in once a customer has an idea what they want?
No, we'll come in at the very front end on ideation and help them to identify use cases. In fact, that's one of the more difficult parts here, because of the hype around the technology. I liken it to everybody's walking around with a hammer and they're trying to find the nails. So we get some pretty crazy ideas about blockchain, and so we have to spend some time with the customer to sort of set their expectations properly, and then really look at where the blockchain technology makes sense to apply. So we'll work with the customer to help figure out what are the friction points within their current business, where are their trust issues. So those sorts of things that blockchain works really well to help mitigate. We help with the customer try to identify those, and then we'll help the customer with things like pilots or POCs. So both either on a pre-sales basis or on a consulting basis. And then finally, we'll also bring in partners where necessary. So a large pilot or something like that, we'll potentially bring in a partner that's experienced in developing blockchain applications. We also get involved in helping, C-levels and stuff like that be able to identify or understand what the benefit of this technology is, because they hear about it and they hear about, blockchain, and oftentimes they equate that to Bitcoin, and they're going, what do I need Bitcoin in my company for? And so it's a bit of a task then to be able to identify what are some real opportunities, and also to be able to differentiate between Bitcoin and blockchain.
Yes, the eternal struggle. Let me ask, we had a couple good questions coming from the audience, including our featured question this week from Eduardo Bianco. So if you're watching this, Eduardo, we got a free exam voucher coming your way. But there were some questions around the languages and the tool sets that you guys support. And Eduardo was asking specifically around Java. And if there are going to be some more possibilities for development in Java. And we hear this kind of generally about all languages outside of the Node.js framework and Go. So are there plans to bring in some more Java tool sets to open this up to other languages? And if so, what does that roadmap look like?
Yeah, so as of our most recent release, which is based upon HyperLedger Fabric 1.3, there is support now for Java chain code. So customers can write their chain code or smart contracts in Java, and that's fully supported. As well, there's a SDK that's available for Java. I've asked our Java experts to see if they can step in and maybe help out with some of that, because we've got people who've got many, many, many years of Java experience, as you can imagine. So we're gonna hopefully have them be able to take a look and start to contribute potentially to the development of both the SDK and the Java framework. One of the concerns about Java is the sort of the resources, right? The JVM is not a small thing. So trying to figure out, maybe using something like MicroProfile or other things to be able to support the smart contracts in a minimal environment, because smart contracts don't require a lot of capabilities. I mean, you don't need something like a JEE application server to run a smart contract. Right? Smart contracts should be purely functional, and as such, you don't typically need then large numbers of libraries or frameworks to be able to develop in. But I think there's some more work that can be done there, and then as well as sort of integrating into the whole CI/CD pipelines and stuff. So that's something else that we're looking at. We do provide the ability to do that kind of integration with our service. The REST proxy that we have also supports administrative interfaces, so you can deploy new chain codes on the fly using the REST APIs or using this gRPC stuff from the Fabric SDKs. So I think we'll see a lot more interest around Java. There's probably I know there are far more Java developers than there are Go developers. Node.js maybe is caught up, I don't know. But we'll support all three of those environments. We're also looking at, talking about sort of future stuff for smart contracts, is looking at things like rules-based engines and stuff. One of our concerns is that customers will develop a smart contract, deploy it, and there'll be bugs in that smart contract, which could cause serious problems. I'm sure most people are familiar with a decentralized autonomous organization that was built on top of Ethereum. And due to a bug in the smart contract, somebody was able to siphon off 60 million in a very short period of time. And so those kinds of things, you need to make sure that the smart contract is accurate and consistent. Doing that in a program is tough, right? Writing true bug-free programs is, nirvana, right? People could do that, or provably correct programs. So until we get to that point, I think we're going to need to start developing things like domain-specific languages or rules-based engines for executing smart contracts.
Interesting. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's some of the biggest risk to a company adopting blockchain right now is, you really got to make sure that you've got your design right, you've got your plan right, you're implementing the right process. Otherwise, you've just reduced the amount of time it takes you to do something wrong, which is not always the end goal.
Yeah, that's another point, by the way, that the one thing, a big advantage that permission to blockchains have. So if there is a problem with the smart contract, you know who the participants are, and you can come to an agreement about how to fix it or how to remedy whatever problem that caused. In permissionless blockchains, but your only choice is to fork. And that's not something you want to do on a regular basis.
No, no. In fact, to anyone watching who's spent time in the Ethereum world, I think one of the things I love most about Hyperledger in general is the fact that you're not storing your logic, your chain code, or your smart contracts on chain. So you can actually do crazy things like in-place updates of your smart contracts, which makes so many of those maintenance concerns on platforms like Ethereum just go away.
Yep. Yep.
That's cool. So we had another great question, Todd, about interoperability. And the question was specifically around whether Oracle's blockchain offerings are planning any kind of interoperability framework with other platforms. And I guess that could mean, something specific to Oracle, or maybe just leveraging some of the work already done through projects like HyperLedger Quilt. But that seems to be a question we get hit with a lot too. What are the plans for interoperability between these platforms? Is that something that you guys are seeing a real big need or desire for in your customer base? And what does some of that look like from a technical perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Interoperability is going to be a must. I mean, we're not going to have one blockchain to rule them all. So unless we have one blockchain to rule them all, you're going to have interoperation between them. So that's a given. I think the problem right now is that we don't have good general purpose protocols at the moment to be able to do cross-ledger transfers. This is true within Fabric, even just between channels, but it's also true between if you wanted to do something in Fabric and Ethereum. There are things like escrow models and stuff like that you can use that help, but none of that's built in at the moment. And unfortunately, we don't have something like two-phase commit kind of protocols, right? Like XA provides. That's where I come from in the traditional transaction processing world. Interoperability between databases and other resource managers was handled by XA. And that works great in those environments. It doesn't work in a blockchain because in a blockchain, you generally don't have locking mechanisms. And so you need to do other things like potentially put things in escrow or stuff like that to be able to do this kind of interoperation. Because you can certainly call an Ethereum smart contract from a Hyperledger smart contract, but there's no coordination of the commits associated with those. So the Ethereum contract might succeed and the Hyperledger one might fail, or vice versa. And now you end up with inconsistencies, right? Because you thought you put something over on that other blockchain, and in fact, it didn't get there. But you don't know about it anymore because you've given it to them. So you've got this general problem about interoperability that I think we're going to have to address as an industry. And I think we need to come up with some creative models for how to handle that. We're watching Quilt to see how it does with the Interledger protocol. But at the moment, as far as I know, it does not handle risk-free interoperation between different blockchain platforms. There's always a risk that somebody's going to be left holding the bag, and because of a broken set of transactions. And that's a problem that's got to get worked out. People propose things like eventual consistency and stuff like that. Well, for certain kinds of things, like especially monetary transfers and stuff like that, eventual consistency may not be the best solution. And eventual consistency is also oftentimes hard to develop, and you get back into then a reconciliation issue then, right? So I think we're going to have to solve this problem, but I think as an industry, we're still quite a ways away from having a good solution to interoperability.
Hey, Todd, follow-up question. I got a good question here in our chat. If a customer has a different ERP system, for example, SAP, can they still deploy the Oracle blockchain service?
Yeah. Well, so the Oracle blockchain service is a PaaS offering, so they would certainly be able to, from their SAP application, to be able to, use our blockchain to invoke transactions, to be able to get notifications of events of transactions having completed. So it's certainly possible to do that. And one thing that's interesting about our service is that customers can do this on their own premise. We don't have an on-premise offering, but what we do allow is, with our implementation of Fabric, is we allow customers to run their own Fabric nodes. So you can run Fabric and you're on-premise in another cloud provider, and we will support having that kind of a federated network or a decentralized network out of multiple places. And I think that's relatively unique as well. So if you have customers who say, nope, I'm not going to go to Oracle's cloud service, I'm going to go to somebody else's cloud service, as long as it's Fabric-based, we will support the ability to be able to have those join to form a single blockchain network.
Wow, okay, great. And to everybody watching, there's Todd, we're getting, I don't know, I'm not sure if you can see it, but we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of great questions. So, which is a great response, and it's very exciting. If you don't mind, Todd, I'll forward you all these questions, and we'll post it on LinkedIn, or I'll make sure everybody's aware, and we'll get Todd's replies to some of these questions, because there's a plethora of good questions on here. So, Todd, if you don't mind, I'll forward those to you, and we'll get those posted for everybody watching.
Sure, that'd be fine. I'd be happy to take a look at those and answer what I can.
Awesome. Awesome. Chris, do you want to jump into some questions? I know you had some questions about supply chain. And I know we had a few questions on our LinkedIn about supply chain and the Oracle offering.
Yeah, I think it's one of those areas that kind of seems like anytime you talk to folks about blockchain, once they have that light bulb moment, they realize that this is more than just Bitcoin. Supply chain, value chain tends to be one of the first places they jump to, and there are just so many opportunities there. So I know that Todd, you guys are already doing some work with some supply chain solutions. Maybe plug those a little bit and tell us kind of what you've been doing in the supply chain world.
Sure. So one of our supply chain customers, who I think just went live yesterday, is a company called Certified Origins. So they're a producer of olive oil, high quality, sort of top of the line kind of olive oil. So they're an Italian-based firm, and they basically take care of working with the farmers to acquire the grapes, to then have the grapes pressed to be able olives, to press the olives to extract the oil, and then the bottling of it, the packaging, the distribution of it, and finally delivered to the stores. And they're using our blockchain service then basically to track that entire supply chain. So from the time the olives are collected from farms to the time that they're pressed and all the steps in between, they're tracking this. And they're going to be providing an app where you can scan the barcode on one of their bottles and say, oh yeah, these olives came from this farm or processed in this particular processing plant. So you'll be able to get the whole thing, be able to see that. So you get this sort of ability to be able to give a lot more information to customers. And that's also one other areas where that's being really important. It's going to be around things like recalls and stuff like that, or contamination. I mean, I'm sure everybody heard about the romaine lettuce fiasco about a month ago or two. And so because they couldn't track where the stuff came from, basically all romaine lettuce got pulled off the shelves. That was an expensive, I suspect, operation. So by using something like a track and trace kind of application to be able to track where the goods came from, how they're processed, all that sort of stuff, you'd be able to very quickly be able to identify where the contaminated romaine lettuce came from. So that's so Certified Origins is one. We have one that's it's a sort of supply chain. It's probably our largest customer right now is called CargoSmart. So CargoSmart is a service and software developer for the shipping industry. And they recently formed a consortium called the Global Shipping Business Network, where they've got some of the largest carriers and shippers and forwarders who are working together to be able to put information on the blockchain for much more transparency and help them be able to eliminate errors and stuff like that. In that business, as goods move from one hand to another hand, you've got paperwork that has to go along with them, because the shipper has to know, are the goods that I'm shipping here, are they safe? Are they dangerous items? Because if they are, they've got to be handled in a special way. Where do they get placed on the ship? So there's a lot of this kind of information, and there's a lot of going back and forth between the shippers, the carriers, and the forwarders. That all has to be tracked. Right now, it was all paper-based. They're moving to an online version, but they're right now using our blockchain service to track essentially the provenance and the information content that's contained in these documents. And one of the reasons for that is because when there's errors there are potentially fines. So if the carrier or the shipper doesn't handle things properly and the port finds out about this, the port may fine then the shipper or the carrier or any of the parties involved. And so you get into also then this whole dispute resolution, right? About who made the error, what was the impact, all that sort of stuff. A lot of this stuff will go away as we get to a single source of truth.
Absolutely, and I think you kind of touched on it too, but just the cost savings, right? How much did it cost to recall all that lettuce we didn't need to recall? Late last summer in the news, Kerrygold Butter, you may have seen, is facing a class action lawsuit here in the U.S. to the tune of about $150 million because they can't validate that their butter is actually coming from all grass-fed cows. So, so many of these solutions, it's not necessarily assuming a cost as much as it is risk or future cost mitigation.
Yeah, I think supply chain is one of the reasons I think it's sort of the most common use case for blockchain is that there are so many parties involved, right? You can have many parties involved in a supply chain, and they all have a vested interest to make sure that things move smoothly, that the information is accurate, that you can be able to track and trace things. So we're seeing that's probably our most popular area, I guess, or the area where we're seeing the most amount of interest. But we're seeing interest across pretty much every one of our verticals because of the ability, as I say, to be able to have a single source of truth that all the parties can agree upon.
You took the words out of my mouth. My next question was to ask you, outside of supply chain, what are some of those areas where you're seeing a lot of growth, or at least a lot of growing interest?
So one of the areas is healthcare. So we have one of our customers is using the blockchain to be able to track information about patients, especially around heart patients, because oftentimes there are relapses or complications that occur within 1 to 2 weeks after surgery. So they want to be able to collect information about the patient by monitoring things in the patient, recording all this on the blockchain, and then to be able to go and be able to potentially anticipate where a particular patient might have an issue or a problem. So we're seeing in healthcare. Another area in healthcare that we're seeing is around the ability of what we call accountable access to confidential information. So the idea is that you use the blockchain to mediate the access to information, because our healthcare information right now is somewhat scattered. So my GP's got my records. Cardiologist has his set of records for me. The hospital, from when I've been hospitalized, has their set of records for me. And so what we can potentially do with a blockchain is we could say, okay, I as the patient, I'll allow this new practitioner to be able to have access to my records and be able to record that on the blockchain and even grant access to that information through the blockchain. So we're seeing it in healthcare. We're seeing it in some other industries. The licensing and titling. So that's another very common use case. So academic credentials or maybe professional licenses. So a lot of that time that the suppliers of that information are many of them. So maybe the university where they took classes, where they got their degree, any licensing boards, how those are handled. All that kind of stuff can be tracked on a blockchain to give much more transparency and to be able to give much more control about the information. So if, let's say, my college transcripts were on a blockchain, I wouldn't want everybody to be able to see those, but with a blockchain, I might give somebody permission to be able to do that. They'd then be able to access that information in a confidential way and without anybody else seeing that, but I can mediate that through a blockchain. What are some of the other industries?
Somebody just asked, Todd, sorry to interrupt you there, about, are you guys working with any government entities that are attempting to look at blockchain and utilize your guys' services?
Yeah. So we have a good example for in government is in Somalia. So not Somalia. I'm sorry.
Nigeria customs.
Thank you. Same continent, different side. So Nigeria Customs is using this to be able to track customs information for shipments coming, arriving, and departing from Nigeria. So similar to a little bit like what CargoSmart's doing, but focusing on what kinds of goods and stuff like that are traveling through their ports. So that's an example. We're working with the National Health System in the UK. This is one for vaccination tracking and disclosing that information. So children there have to be vaccinated before they're allowed to attend school. And so they have to be able to provide proof that the vaccination was applied, what doctor performed the vaccination. So all that kind of information they're going to be tracking on a blockchain.
I'm afraid to ask, somebody just asked in the chat, but what about the U.S. government? Are we doing anything?
I've not been involved in any, so I don't know. I know it's funny. I'm in Illinois, and Illinois has a blockchain initiative. but so far there's not been much action going on there. Maybe because of our budget, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
The
can,
Cook County is doing some great things, right? That's we had a good chat with a couple of folks at the clerk's office from Cooks County, that they're trying to utilize HyperLedger right now to I think store of information on real estate.
Yeah, so the real estate titles is a classic example of where a blockchain would make a lot of sense, right? So right now, if I buy a house, I've got to go to a title company. It acts as an intermediary and provides me insurance because they presumably then have searched all the records and make sure that the title is clear. If that title was held on a blockchain and any reports against that or any claims against that title were recorded on the blockchain, you'd know immediately whether the title's free and clear. So you can very quickly speed up the whole operation, but also probably put title companies out of business. But that's a secondary side effect.
So I want to, Ray, thanks for posting that, and we'll post in the description. We get a lot of questions about how people can go and trial the Oracle offering. So thanks for posting that, Ray, and I'll make sure to put that in the description as well. I see about 10 people asked how they can go and start experimenting with the Oracle offering. So Ray, I appreciate you posting that. We'll make sure to post that for everybody as well. Chris, do you want to get into the lessons learned on where not to go with blockchain?
Yeah, this is really what I've been dying to ask. I love having these conversations, Todd, because so many people right now are talking about this technology. So it's really exciting to have conversations with folks like yourself who are actually out there doing and not just talking. So as a practitioner, as a group that's been out there actually building and delivering solutions, what are some of the lessons you guys have learned? You mentioned, and I completely agree, by the way, that we're still at this point with the technology where everyone's running around with their hammer, banging it into everything to see if it's a nail. Where are some of the areas you've seen where blockchain hasn't been a good fit or it hasn't necessarily provided value?
Well, there's a couple things around that. First of all, just getting the qualification part of it. One of the first questions I ask customers is, are the problems you're trying to solve or the issues you're trying to deal with, can they be solved with a centralized database? And if they can, end of discussion. Centralized databases, we know how to build applications on those. We've been doing that for decades. Decentralized applications, we've been doing only a few years. So we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the design patterns, at least not as rich as ones as we have for centralized systems. So that helps narrow down and helps eliminate some of the, I would call, bad use cases, because I've seen some of those, and you sort of go, why is this decentralized? There's only one party involved. If there's only one party involved, it may be in a large organization. You've got different departments. Maybe you would do that. But I've seen some bad cases where a customer, you have to ask them and go, I don't see the value that you're gaining from doing this. I think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems we're seeing is consortium forming. So this technology enables new business models, and so you have to figure out how to apply those new business models, how to make them attractive financially. So you need to have incentives for people to be able to participate. If it just costs them and they don't gain anything that at least they can perceive, the project's going to be a failure. So there has to be motivation to be able to move to this technology. So that's one of the things we always look for, is to say, what are the friction points that you have? What are the trust issues you have between your business partners? Where are you performing things like reconciliation? Because if you're performing reconciliation, that tells you right away that you've got two different systems of record that you're trying to keep in sync. Blockchain does that automatically. So I think the biggest areas we're seeing is that we see customers start, and then they start to question about what's the value going to be, how much value are they going to get out of a blockchain solution. So that's one part of it. We also have customers coming in who sort of try to treat this style, this permissioned blockchain, as almost as they would a permissionless blockchain. And I think the design patterns are going to be very different. And so we've seen some things that are not particularly successful there. Other areas we see is that we have sometimes a hard time just getting customers to get started with a pilot or a POC. because getting the C levels to be able to fund this and to be able to say, oh yeah, I see what the financial or what other benefits are going to be from this. So it's also early on. I don't think we have some spectacular failures yet to point to. Much as we did with older technologies such as 4GLs and object-oriented databases, and we had some spectacular, well-known failures in those technologies. For permission blockchains, not as much, at least not yet. Hope maybe we can avoid that. I'm not sure.
This is just selfishly one of the things that got me so excited about blockchain. When we were talking a little bit earlier about interoperability, you mentioned, boy, we know there's a need for a solution and some design patterns. We don't know what they are yet. You mentioned it again. Hey, we know there are going to be some different design patterns for permissioned implementation versus permissionless ones. We just don't know what they are yet. To anyone who's spent some time in technology, this is potentially a very exciting area to get involved in, because unlike so many other areas of technology, we don't know what the answers are yet. We don't have the best practices, and that can either be incredibly terrifying or incredibly exciting, depending on your outlook. For me, it's definitely the latter, but I would encourage anyone watching this, if you've kind of been watching blockchain from the side, the fact that so much of this picture still hasn't been drawn yet is attractive to you, there's just a great opportunity, I think, to get involved. And so that'll kind of selfishly lead me to another question I wanted to ask, given that at BTA, we're all about training and education. So again, as practitioners, what would you say some of the skill sets you would like to see folks out in the enterprise world learn in order to be able to adopt this technology, whether those are technical skills or non-technical?
Good question. Part of it is you're going to need to apply domain analysis to this, right? If you're going to look at what's been done in the past, how that's not worked, or what are the problems that's caused in the past, you want to do things differently. So you want to also collect the information about, where are those friction points? How are they manifesting themselves within your organizations? So those kind of analytical skills are going to be obviously key. I think from a technical view, it's going to require look at Fabric. So Fabric uses multi-version concurrency control, and so what that means is that if you have two transactions in a block that modify the same key, one of them is going to fail. Okay, because if it reads it, then the version is going to be different, and then they can't commit. So you have to watch out for things like hotkeys. You have to watch out for how you're going to model your data, because right now it's all key value. A lot of enterprise applications historically have been using SQL, SQL-based databases, and as really they know how to handle some of these things. The NoSQL or the key value ones, the data modeling becomes very critical. How do you define your keys? What kind of information goes into those values? So knowing ways to be able to model stuff in a key value database, I think is going to be critical. One of the things I forgot to mention, by the way, about Oracle's implementation is that in traditional Fabric, there's what they call rich queries, where you can make a query against the key value pair if you're using CouchDB. So you can say, I want to query now against those values instead of just doing a key lookup. That works fine, except CouchDB performance is not particularly great. Being a database company, we're going, okay, we can do better than that. So we've replaced LevelDB with BerkeleyDB, and we've placed SQLite on top of that. So there's a SQLite driver for BDB. So you can do full relational queries against a key value store. So I can say select from where the value of the owner is Todd, and I get all my marbles from that, from using the marbles example. So that's going to help a lot, I think. But I think, in traditional blockchains where you only have the key value store, the modeling is going to be important. Understanding issues of like concurrency and the fact that most of these things are asynchronous. So like in Fabric, the model is essentially you submit a transaction, but it's an asynchronous operation. You get acknowledgement that the transaction has been submitted, but the outcome of the transaction comes back to you later as an event. And so that's going to change, I think, some programming models. People are more accustomed to strictly request response. And actually, they can get that with our REST proxy. Our REST proxy will provide that kind of fully synchronous interaction to make life easier for people. But I think for many applications, being able to deal with a completely asynchronous model is something that they're going to need to be able to understand. As well, I think, with any blockchain, one of the big concerns, or one of the big issues, is that your smart contracts have to be deterministic. And that's something people haven't had to worry about in the past. I could ask for the time right now, and I could ask for the time in 5 minutes from now, and that's fine. But in a decentralized model, you can't ask the current time, because the peers may be executing these smart contracts at different times, because the client submitted to peer A at one point and submitted to peer B at another point, and their clocks aren't synchronized as well. So you can't use timestamps that are generated inside your smart contract. So there's these kinds of issues that are going to be things people stumble across, and oftentimes they're going to stumble across them when they get inconsistent results. Things won't fail, but what they'll find is that all of a sudden the contents of the peers' databases start to diverge, and you no longer have a single source of truth, which is a problem. But I think determinism is going to be a bit of a thing for people to have to learn how to write deterministic code.
Yeah, I was kind of chuckling to myself as you were talking about that, because we see this, at least I do personally, on the education side all the time. We get people, kind of two groups who come into the classes. The first group going, hey, I'm not very technical. I don't come from a long technical background. I'm probably in over my head, right? And they're the ones who are worried. They tend to go take the exam and just ace it the first time. The people who fail it the first time, by and large, are the developers who go in the back and go, you know what, I got this. I've been writing code for 30 years. I've been doing this since the punch card days. And, there's, like determinism, so much about blockchain that if you've been in this space for a while, you have to unlearn everything you know and just adopt a new way of thinking.
Yep. I think something else is going to happen is, since we don't have good mechanisms to be able to do cross-ledger transactions, you're going to end up, I think, in many cases with the client application, because that's typically what you have, right? You don't have a user interact directly with the blockchain. They're going to interact with an application that's using the blockchain. And so a lot of, I think, sort of that, some of that coordination and workflow and all that sort of stuff, that's all going to sit outside the smart contract. The smart contract's got to be relatively small, but treated as a pure function. And if you do that, you'll be in much better shape. And I think that's going to be something to say people will have to learn the hard way.
Yes. Like we do every 20 years, it seems, when one of these big sweeping changes comes. Well, we got a few minutes left. Let me turn it over to Chad, because I'm sure we're probably getting a lot of good comments in the chat.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of great questions. Todd, where should people go to learn about the Oracle offering from here? We'll make sure to put any links as well in the description. But where do you recommend starting if they want to learn more about Oracle and your offering?
Yeah, for our service, the two places to look would be oracle.com/blockchain. Or cloud.oracle.com/blockchain. Well, they'll take you to different locations, but both of them will have all the information about our service or our offering. So that would be a good thing. And as well, we are based upon HyperLedger Fabric. So it would be helpful if customers are thinking about using our service to become familiar with that. So the HyperLedger website has plenty of information about Fabric. What are the APIs? How do you develop smart contracts? Much of that. So those would be the two places I guess I would start.
Okay. And then somebody asked, are the Oracle blockchain tools thought of for only mid to big size companies, or are there also free tools for freelancers and startups?
Well, we don't charge for any of the tooling of ours. All we charge for, as I say, is the transaction volume. So for small businesses, 500 transactions per hour is probably more than enough. And as you mentioned, the cost, we're talking about $300 to $400 cost a month. So the local corner store, convenience store may not have a need for that, but there'll be, I think, a lot of cases where we'll see smaller and definitely medium-sized businesses using this technology. I think what will also happen is you'll see medium-sized businesses creating services based upon blockchain that then are offered then to like small businesses. One of the things that's been talked about is things like micro copyright, right? So I could copyright information by just simply posting a hash of that information onto somebody's blockchain. And so offering that as a service is probably going to be something that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I would just add to that Todd, as you mentioned, all of this is based on HyperLedger, which is open source, and the HyperLedger Foundation has have some really, really good learning resources and tutorials out there. So if you're just getting your toes wet in blockchain, or specifically in private permission blockchains, that could be a really, really good place to start.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, and so I want to address something real quick for BTA's sake here. Chris, you could jump in as well. Somebody keeps posting the question: with so many blockchain certifications in the market right now, how's the certification from Blockchain Training Alliance different from others? And I want to kind of just touch on that real quick, and we'll move back over to Oracle. But Blockchain Trading Alliance, we're not really tracking anybody else's certifications. We try to focus and provide the best value we can. We were lucky enough to have people like Todd go through our exams, validate them, provide us feedback, and we're open to feedback always. So we're doing the best we can to provide something that's valid to the market. We run our test through Pearson View as a third party, so that the validity of the test stands. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me directly. Message Chris. I know we'll try our best to answer and provide value and the value we provide. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I'd throw in there because I think the same question came up on LinkedIn. I'm a big believer with starting with the end in mind. And I'm not going to be foolish enough to pretend that all of our offerings are the ideal offerings for everyone out there. But if you have an understanding what it is you want to achieve, it makes it a lot easier to look at the different offerings and see whether they're going to help move you along towards that goal, or whether they won't. So what is it are you just trying to learn generally about blockchain? Are there specific platforms you're interested in? Do you have a great idea for a consumer application? Are you more interested in some of the things that Todd is talking about and getting involved with blockchain on the enterprise side, solving businesses in your organization? What's the end goal? And once you understand that, I think it becomes a lot easier to see whether our offerings are the right ones, or whether you're better off with a different provider.
Absolutely. And so in closing, Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add, or any closing statements about Oracle and you guys' future plans?
As far as future plans, we have lots of them, I guess.
Where to start?
One of the things we're trying to do as well is make it easier for customers to utilize the blockchain, right? And so one of the areas that people run into is that the blockchain now becomes sort of a separate island of information, if you will. One of the things that we also offer in our service is that we provide a mechanism to be able to transparently take your transactions as they're being processed and write them to a relational database. And so once you've got them in a relational database, then you can use any kind of business intelligence or business analytics tools to be able to take a look at your transactions. Because otherwise, the only way to get access to the information is through a smart contract. And there aren't any BI tools that I'm aware of that know how to invoke a smart contract. So by siphoning off this information, giving that as an option at least, then you can start applying some of these traditional tools that we have used for a long time to be able to process this vast amount of information. So, but I think the thing that I would say is for people is to try this stuff. Figure out, where is an area you can take a look at in your business, where there's some friction, where there's some trust issues, and do a simple pilot or simple POC. We've had, our teams can help you do that. We've got situations where a complete POC is done in a couple of days. So, I think the thing here is to don't be frightened by the technology, but also test it. Don't buy the hype, because sometimes the hype exceeds the reality.
Absolutely. Chris, do you have any final thoughts in closing here?
I'll just everything that Todd said put me down as well. I just absolutely hit the nail on the head. And don't get caught up in the hype. Again, begin with the end in mind. I think in the work that we've done with customers and clients, when you find a good blockchain use case, it's pretty clear to everyone involved that you found a good use case. If you're maybe dealing with a mediocre one, or you find yourself having conversations about, well, you could do this in a database, we could do it in a blockchain, we're not sure which way to go. 99% of the time, if it's not very, very clear that blockchain is the right way to go, maybe a little bit more discovery work is required.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Todd, I want to just definitely start with thank you for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to have you on, and I want to thank everybody in the audience as well for joining us and all the questions, and we'll be sure to get as many of them answered as possible. So thanks again, Todd, for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to have done it.
Yeah, absolutely. The pleasure is ours, and thank you to everybody who joined us and watched, participated. Without all you guys, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you from BTA, and we look forward to the next time we see you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Are you looking to become a certified blockchain solution architect, but you just can't attend one of Blockchain Training Alliance's live 3-day trainings? We have great news for you. Blockchain Solution Architect training is now available on demand. No matter where you are in the world, you can now learn on your own time, at your own pace. This self-paced course is taught by BTA's Chief Learning Officer and lead instructor, Chris Bennett.
Hello and welcome to the Blockchain Training Alliance's course on blockchain architecture. My name is Chris Bennett. I'll be your instructor. Over the coming hours, we're going to start from the very basics of blockchain and walk you through everything you need to know to start identifying good use cases in the world around you and building compelling blockchain solutions.
With 60 days of access, a course study guide, an exam voucher, all included, our on-demand package is all you need to get certified. Enroll today by visiting blockchaintrainingalliance.com.
Hi guys, it's Ken with the Blockchain Training Alliance, and I'm here to tell you about some major developments that we made in HyperLedger Fabric. We've written a lab guide that teaches you how to go from zero to hero using composer development. This teaches you how to write model files, create transaction processors, write permissions files, and also queries. We don't stop there. We teach you how to package up the business network and deploy it to a REST server. And then we teach you how to secure it using OAuth. And at the very end, we tell you to throw everything away, and we give you a capstone project on how to create a business network from scratch. So if you're interested, go ahead and click the button below.
Are you interested in learning more about blockchain or becoming blockchain certified? That's where we come in. We are Blockchain Training Alliance, the global leader in blockchain training and certification. We offer training courses in a number of ways. Live in person, either on-site at your location, or at one of our classrooms worldwide. Live, virtually, via WebEx, or self-paced. If you are looking to verify and validate your knowledge, we have 4 certification exams that are proctored in person at more than 7,000 testing centers across the globe. We have 1-day Business Foundation courses. And if that's not deep enough for you, we have a 3-day Blockchain Solution Architect course. For developers, we have hands-on Ethereum and HyperLedger courses. Our training includes expert instructors, hands-on labs, real-world applications, a course book, an official study guide, and 1 free exam voucher. We have trained thousands of students worldwide and have professionals becoming certified every day. Visit Blockchain Training Alliance to learn more about our blockchain training and certification programs.